Welcome to the Tuesday, December 20th edition of the show. We got your Jalen Hurts coverage. We got Jonathan Taylor, and hopefully we can hear from a lot of you who have advanced in the fantasy playoffs. If you had either of those, like our boy over here, might have a different conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just advancing; it is avoiding punishment for many of us out there. So, plenty of reasons to give us a listen and stay tuned today.
Yeah, we'll get to all that, and of course, any of the other top waiver wire pickups here as we continue on throughout the show. So, just stick around. All right, welcome to the December 20th edition again of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by No House Advantage. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports. Alongside me, as always, is Jake. Jake's having a tough day. He had a couple Jonathan Taylor shares that have not went the way you'd be hoping for, but otherwise, interesting enough waiver wire for Week 16 edition of the show.
Yeah. So, we were joking before the show, like, man, some people might have to replace Jonathan Taylor. Well, in reality, if you had Jonathan Taylor, you probably didn't make the playoffs in the first place. And if you were lucky enough to get into the playoffs, he definitely knocked you out this week by taking an L. Somehow or another, I had 3 Jonathan Taylor leagues. One, I traded for him, kind of a buy low late in the season situation. Another one was a dynasty league. And another one was one where I just killed the rest of the draft. And then Christian Watson saved my season. So I had more exposure than most to Jonathan Taylor in the fantasy playoffs, and the Badger let me down one last time. But hopefully he gets healthy and has a 2,000-yard season next year for my dynasty league because I need to bounce back.
I was going to say, at the very least, Jalen Hurts had the common courtesy to get you 30 points before he inevitably will not be able to play. We'll discuss that. Obviously, the Eagles have not ruled out Jalen Hurts yet, but I would imagine, given they need to win just one of the next 3, that it would be unlikely the MVP frontrunner ends up playing. Before we really dive into the waiver wire and also obviously the Monday night game, our Packers still alive in the playoffs. Let's get a word from our sponsors, No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today, playing pick'em contests versus other people for a shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for a shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 extra entry if you hit all of your picks. Bet on up to 5 player props, over-unders, or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up with promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at No House Advantage, or download the app on the App Store to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined. Remember, it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. So let's talk about our Packers first, Jake, because this was the most dominant win by the Packers this season. They've had 4 before this, and 2 of them are against the Bears. So it's really hard to have more dominant wins than that, I guess I should say. I thought the offense played well enough, and the defense looked pretty good. Now, this is also a Rams team that is just devoid of anything in terms of skill guys, and I thought that was very evident as well, too, where Baker Mayfield and company just could not advance the ball other than Cam Akers.
Yeah, and of course, the Rams have tons of problems on the offensive line. Didn't help their case that their starting center went out on the first drive here. So, even the Packers that are banged up on the defensive front in the pass rushing area, obviously missing Rashawn Gary, were able to get home and pressure Baker Mayfield plenty of times. And you knew the real Baker was going to come out at some point this week, and on the road in the cold. Yeah, sure, he got another week with the offense, but that magic was not going to continue. There's a reason we weren't even interested. Didn't even rank Baker in terms of streamers last week. And the Packers gave me a little bit of hope. This is the first time they've had their full allotment of receivers, on the field. And we had talked so much about how that position had been hurting, just devastated by injuries, but they're finally in a good enough place where they waived Sammy Watkins in the morning. Right. So now they've got Dobbs. He looked good in his return. He caught everything, literally everything, all 5 targets that went his way. Christian Watson, again, looking pretty dynamic. There was that weird Rodgers overthrow interception where maybe he'll find a way to blame the receiver for that one. I don't know. But yeah, he missed the open man, so that was a little concerning. But that and the running game looked really good too, as well. But of course, the 1-2 punch of AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones might just be a one-man punch next week because AJ Dillon was getting tested for a concussion. I don't know if we have anything definitive on that yet. No. I didn't quite see anything yet, but but that gets interesting. I mean, it'll be a Jones heavy game. It's technically a short week because it was a Monday night. So, and you know how concussions have been. You know, he would basically it would have to be determined that he didn't actually have a concussion for him to be cleared. So, you know, we'll see what happens there. But otherwise, it's the Aaron Jones show in Miami next week in a must-win game.
And Aaron Jones was fine last night too. I mean, A.J. Dillon had the 2 touchdowns. Aaron Jones got the 1 in the second half, which was a pretty critical one.
Yep. Now, I saw some bad beats on Twitter where like the Aaron Jones fumble cost him. And the Aaron Jones fumble, for what that's worth, I've seen that whistled as forward progress 9 times out of 10, right? I mean, was he pretty much stopped?
So
he was stood up, and then Ramsey kind of just picked the ball out of there. And,
I know what you're saying.
Great play by Ramsey, but I like pretty much got up thinking that they had whistled it, but they had not.
I know what you're saying. The Packers, I feel like, specifically are a team that has benefited from that being a non-whistled call over the years, because that offensive line is routinely pushing those guys 2 or 3 yards forward in that exact spot. So I turned to my wife.
And you have a bruiser like Dillon.
Yeah,
right?
I turned to my wife and I said, you know what? I understand where that could be ruled dead, but we've benefited so often I didn't care. I thought that was the correct call given what the Packers have done. So A.J. Dillon obviously having the 2 touchdown game, that might not be able to play next week. Patrick Taylor got a few carries. I don't think it's possible where Aaron Jones gets every single touch, but I also don't think a guy like Patrick Taylor or whoever they probably call up as well too, in the event that A.J. Dillon misses time with the concussion, is going to necessarily impact things enough where you would start him in the championships or semifinals of your fantasy playoffs.
He's a bullet point on the bottom of my running back list for like the deepest 20 team, double flex kind of league. But yeah, I don't think there's enough there to be fantasy relevant. I mean, he'd have to like squeeze a touchdown. You'd have to get really lucky.
Yeah. Where did Romeo Doubs fall in terms of waiver wire pickups? Did he go above our 50% threshold? Because
and he still is actually above. Actually, let me see. I thought I wrote it down, but he was only like 16% last week or something like that, and now he's up to he's 16% now.
Okay.
16% now. So last week we kind of gave a heads up, like, okay, Dobbs is out there, he's around. Now he's just 16%. So he could, we've got some receivers we like this week, but he could easily take the top of that list.
Yeah, it's interesting because Christian Watson got involved in the second half. He could have had that touchdown. Rodgers and him were kind of joking around at the end of the game where very clearly Watson missed a single, which would have been continuing his touchdown streak. I feel like Romeo Doubs is the number 1, right? I mean, I know that Watson's the most explosive and probably has the opportunity to score, but when Rodgers needed to get a first down, it was Romeo Doubs, not Allen Lazard. I guess Randall Cobb at times, but it was Romeo Doubs that was really kind of that player.
So think of it like when the Steelers offense was humming like a couple years ago, or even just a year ago. Think of Doubs as the Deontay Johnson and Watson is like the Claypool type. Right? That's kind of the analogy that I'd make.
Or Antonio Brown, right?
I mean, same exactly. If we go back even further, but yeah. So I would say Dobbs is probably going to be the better and more consistent PPR play, while Watson has more potential to have the very, very big explosive games. His touchdown streak finally broken, but
any other notes from the Rams' perspective offensively?
Yeah, I mean, look, Baker was 12 for 21, 111 yards. There's nothing really there. They also, you mentioned their lack of skill players. I mean, Akers is probably playable if you've made it this far with him. But like you look at the pass catching distribution, Tyler Higbee led the way with 5 targets. And then Tutu Atwell, Ben Skronik, they each only had 1 catch and only 2 catches for Van Jefferson. So they're, I thought because of the draft pedigree and because of last man standing that Van Jefferson would really be able to kind of emerge down the stretch, and I just don't think we're seeing it.
No, I also think the conditions were tough for the Rams, and they clearly didn't really want to be there. They're on a playoff.
Yeah.
There's going to be better matchups ahead than what we saw. Not that the Packers defense is a good match, not that they're a good defense. I just think this was the good situation for that to play out. We had talked about the Packers defense as a waiver wire pickup last week. It was almost like masochism. Like I rolled the dice, played the Packers defense, and they did clinch 2 wins for me. We had to sweat out the Christian Watson not touchdown.
I was on the Saints defense in a lot of spots last week, and that ended up working out
with Desmond Ritter's first start. Let's talk about the quarterback position. Obviously, Jalen Hurts is going to be the big news. He suffered the shoulder strain in that win over the Bears, came back to play, or maybe I don't know how that really.
Apparently, it happened in the third quarter.
Yeah, it just kind of was a weird
he finished the game.
Right. He finished the game. Also, we'll talk about Ryan Tannehill as well, too, who came back from his injury as well. But now we're talking about a shoulder sprain for the possible MVP, one of the top fantasy players overall. The Eagles have to win one of the next 3, or the Cowboys lose one of the next 3 to clinch home field advantage throughout the entire playoffs. Because of that, I don't believe Jalen Hurts plays. Like I'm actually operating under the assumption that Jalen Hurts is out, even though the Eagles have not said that yet. And I wouldn't be surprised with this divisional matchup that they play some gamesmanship with this. There's no way Jalen Hurts plays, right, Jake?
Well, so again, we're in the business of facts here at RotoWire, right? And all we know right now is a shoulder sprain. But if you poke around on Twitter and you poke around on Reddit, you're seeing a lot of collarbone rumors with Jalen Hurts. They're all over the place. They're rampant. I cannot confirm any of that, but they're out there. And some people are thinking about that. So obviously that's more of a serious situation. But regardless of, whether it's a sprained shoulder or a collarbone, I would imagine he misses multiple games. Again, who knows? Maybe it's just a ruse and he could be back this week. Again, this is the downside of a Tuesday show here. But I'm taking Minshew as probably my top overall pickup this week. One, because he's available everywhere, so he can help you in your 2 quarterback leagues. 2, the streamers kind of stink this week. There really isn't much. And 3, you look at Gardner Minshew, he's been at least capable everywhere he's went. And this Philly team is by far the best supporting cast in terms of pass catchers and, running backs and just overall, the best supporting cast that he has ever had. And, he's been with, it's not like it's someone like Baker coming in on a week's notice. He's been with the team the entire year. He's not going to have the same magic with his legs here, but I almost think that, it could be an upgrade for Miles Sanders and maybe an upgrade for A.J. Brown, even, someone that'll be less likely to take off and, have more pass attempts and less rushing attempts. So it could be a benefit for some of these Eagles. Now the rest of the season schedule isn't great. They're at Dallas, they're versus New Orleans, and they're versus the Giants. All 3 of those teams are top half of the league, in defending opposing quarterbacks from a fantasy perspective. So it's not the best rest of season schedule, but so my dilemma is, for example, okay, should I start Deshaun Watson this week, or should I try to pick up Gardner Minshew, or should I just go ahead and start a guy like Deontay Johnson in my Superflex playoffs? So you have to make these kinds of decisions, and I'm very much leaning towards putting in what do I got to use my fab on anymore, for the rest of the year anyway. So I might as well dump it all out on Minshew. And, it is a 2 quarterback league. So if my opponent out there is listening, and wants to block me and has more fab, I haven't checked that yet, good strategy, absolutely viable strategy. But he's someone that I'm definitely going to be looking into this week.
Yeah, Watson against the Saints isn't that bad of a call, although I don't know if Marshawn Lattimore will be available. I know Watson only had 161 yards in that Saturday win, which was kind of a sleeper, obviously in between the 2, the comeback of the Vikings.
That was ugly.
That Bills game. But that's Ravens Browns to a T. So I'm not surprised. I actually feel like Watson would be more than fine. You had mentioned I'm not dunking on you necessarily, but this is the same type of context. We had talked about Colt McCoy last week, and you were convinced that Colt McCoy was going to be a fantasy asset, and I know he got injured, but he wasn't. I mean, the Broncos secondary was pretty good. That game was just a stinker overall from an offensive perspective. That's the type of problem I see with Gardner Minshew. I understand what you're mentioning with the weapons, and you're right. You wouldn't think Jalen Hurts being out would raise the floor for both Miles Sanders and A.J. Brown, but it certainly could. I think we're discounting just what Jalen Hurts brings to that offense. Like Gardner Minshew might be one of the more capable backups in the league, but he's still a backup. Maybe he starts for the Texans or somebody else. He's not that good of a player, and the Cowboys defense certainly has been inconsistent, as we've seen the past 2 weeks. But this is a divisional game, which they will be ready for. I think they kind of slept on the Jaguars for a reason, because they were looking to this matchup. I'm not convinced Gardner Minshew outperforms a guy like Deshaun Watson, for example.
Yeah. So that's a tough one. I mean, I think in the end, you're looking at 2 guys that are going to end up in between 15 and 20 fantasy points. And, you might be, just grasping straws or whatever, trying to make a guess here. But, I'm glad you brought up Colt McCoy. It was tough. He never really got into a groove against the Broncos. The Broncos, a great secondary. We did warn about that at least. Of course, my Colt McCoy love last week was largely based on, perceived utility rest of season, especially, in those 2 quarterback types of leagues. But then, of course, he leaves with a concussion. He's day-to-day. Now it's the Trace McSorley show. Now I'm sorely worried about my DeAndre Hopkins shares a little bit. Any Hollywood Brown shares. Hollywood Brown becomes not so much of a guaranteed start anymore. I think Hopkins, obviously over his career, time and time again, has shown that he can excel with whoever is playing quarterback for the team. But But yeah, it's rough. They're home against Tampa Bay next week, middle of the pack. I mean, Tampa Bay obviously has not looked very good of late. So, who knows what happens there. But McSorley is your guy for 2 quarterback leagues, I guess.
While you were riding Colt McCoy last week, I was riding Mike White with the assumption that he would return, and that's not going to happen. He's going to be ruled out more than likely for this Thursday contest. So I can say that you might not have been right on the Colt McCoy. I was also wrong. You have Zach Wilson now, who looked fantasy-wise, was fine enough against the Lions, has an easier matchup this week, Thursday, against the Jaguars. I don't know. I actually think Zach Wilson, this is one of those plug your nose and dive in type of situations, might be the best streamer of the group. Are you disagreeing with that statement?
Yeah, I'd probably take, I'm going to buy the Minshew Mania over Zach Wilson. I've seen enough tape on both of these guys to know.
Let's do it. I'm ready. Week 16, Culver's board bet. Let's put it on the line right here. Zach Wilson will outscore Gardner Minshew in the most inconsequential Culver's board bet that we've had up to date.
I'm going to take Gardner Minshew, but obviously if something happens and Hurts ends up starting the game and it all ends up being a ruse, then it's void, of course.
I agree with you. All right. I do. I will go with Zach Wilson in this contest, more so because I think the Jaguars defense just isn't quite up to snuff. But there is Ryan Tannehill, too, that I think is worth mentioning in this conversation.
In the 2 quarterback discussion, for sure. Yeah, so he can miss time with his ankle injury. That opens the door to Malik Willis. Home game against Houston next week. Now, if you look at defense versus position stats, you're going to be surprised that Houston is number 3 against opposing quarterbacks, right? That they're really good at defending the pass. You wouldn't guess that, but I think a lot of that problem is they find themselves behind in games, and teams are running on them. So I could see a big time Derrick Henry game next week for sure. But nonetheless, Malik Willis is there's some of that ceiling rookie unknown type of magic maybe, but I don't love him as a stream over many of these guys, but he is one of them that you can back these bids up with if you need a second quarterback to replace Hurts, for example.
So I did the SiriusXM show yesterday with Nick, and he actually reminded me that Malik Willis did play against the Texans the last time these two teams faced off. So the Texans are a bit more intimately familiar with Malik Willis than probably much of the NFL is. Now, if you recall, that was just a Derrick Henry all the way game, and I think Malik Willis maybe threw 10 times. At this point, and I was pretty high on Malik Willis entering the season, at this point, the Titans are not high on Malik Willis, and it feels very much like they will try to get by with having him do as little as a quarterback thing as possible, which makes me more concerned. So you mentioned the rookie unknown factor with this. I think it's Titans, maybe more known. I think the Titans are known of what Malik Willis, what they feel comfortable with Malik Willis doing. That's a different conversation. What they should be doing, but I don't. He's very low on the totem pole if Ryan Tannehill does not play. I mean, Ryan Tannehill did come back in the game against the Chargers. I know he left on the stretcher, but came back. It's one of those things to keep in mind with the Jaguars, hot on their heels. For that
left
AFC
in the stretcher, but came back. Is this a soccer game or what?
I don't know. You might as well. It's some sort of football, right? World Cup confirmation, I should say. So. If you are missing Jalen Hurts and you are of the luxury in a 10-team league or something like that, there might be the Ryan Tannehill available who's at 41% rostered. There might be Russell Wilson at 46% rostered against the Rams. And the Broncos could be getting back Cortland Sutton too. So it's Sutton and Judy. That might be the best the offense has looked. And I don't know. I'm having a hard time convincing myself Russell Wilson at this point of the season is who we want to go to. If you don't have those top guys, and you aren't going to go with Gardner Minshew, and you're going to go with someone else, what's on that list of streamers for you?
I mean, I put Minshew number 1 on my rankings. Obviously, we've been through that. I put Brock Purdy number 2. He's home against the Commanders, and over his last 3 games, he's looking at 18.7, 23.6, 18.4 fantasy points. Now, how many of those 18.4 points last week were the complete Kittle blown coverage? But nonetheless, that's consistent enough production to again put you in that 15 to 25 point range. I actually did put Zach Wilson number 3.
Okay,
and then let's see here. I wrote down Henry, but I don't know exactly what I meant by that. So
you meant that Derrick Henry is going to dominate things.
Yes,
Malik
exactly.
Willis doesn't get involved, right?
But I mean, then you're looking at Mac Jones against Cincinnati. Nope. I mean, Tyler Huntley versus Atlanta. He's only 18% rostered, but it's looking like Lamar has a chance to suit up and play. So I don't make that call yet. Matt Ryan, 14% versus the Chargers. Again, you want to talk, Reddit rumors. There's some. Maybe your Colts guy knows this, but Nick Foles.
Yeah, I saw that too.
You saw that? You saw that Reddit rumor too?
That
yeah,
too,
some guys he bet his entire like Reddit ban on like he'll be banned if that's not the case.
If Nick Foles is not starting the rest of the season for the Colts.
All right.
I don't know. I don't really consider that relevant fantasy wise either way.
Exactly.
We do have a question about Hurts, and I think this is important because whether I list Ryan Tannehill or Russell Wilson, there are these types of quarterbacks available, Jake. So this person lost Jalen Hurts, also is anticipating Jalen Hurts does not play. So who should he pick up on waivers instead? Aaron Rodgers against the Dolphins. Now got all of his complement of weapons back. Jared Goff at the Panthers. Obviously, Goff has not been good on the road, but it is against a softer matchup, although J.C. Horn says otherwise. Or Brock Purdy against the Commanders. I guess you could throw Minshew in there too, but don't. Of that group,
that's pretty nice. That's a pretty nice list of options. Given Hurts, and man, I don't know about recency bias, but you're getting recency bias and you're getting Packer bias from me. But go ahead and give me Aaron Rodgers. He's got his weapons back. These rookies are starting to get it. I think he'd be the guy that I pick.
I kind of lean towards Rodgers too, and I'm wondering if it was also the Packers bias, so the fact that you confirmed it as well.
He's got Dobbs and Watson back, and they're both playing well.
Right.
And I think they're going to have to score more points than they did last night to win against the Dolphins on the road.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In a Christmas Day matchup. The Goff one's interesting. I think Goff gets you mentioned Gardner Minshew and Watson fall in that 15 to 20-point range. Yeah. I would say Goff is on the upper thresholds of that, though the Panthers have been better defensively. I get the away game concerns. We talked about that Friday, actually, Mario and I, that Goff is something like 4-20 in games below 40-degree weather. And I'm not sure Carolina fits that, but he the smaller hands and everything else draft profile wise. I know. I just don't know if that offense is more than capable with the players they have. So anything else you want to talk about quarterback wise, or should we move on?
No, that hits it for quarterbacks for me.
Okay, let's go to the running backs. Before we do so, stop for a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Again, if you're the audio audience, stick around. Video audience, we'll be right back. Okay, so running backs, we had mentioned Chuba Hubbard last week. Deonta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard didn't really do a whole lot. Then there was the Rex Burkhead, Dare Gumbawale. We'll talk about that in a second as well, too.
Wow.
And then Damian Harris from the Patriots ended up, I think, being ruled out. And yeah, Ramondre Stevenson go absolutely nuts, despite being listed as questionable. Thankfully, didn't hurt your stake league team.
Yeah, Ramondre Stevenson on my bench over Van Jefferson. I made some better calls, but fortunately was still able to come away with the win there. But we've got some much more attractive running back options this week.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about the Texans' backfield first, because we had just alluded to Rex Burkhead or Dare Gumbawale being the guys. Well, neither of those. It was Royce Freeman, who I don't think anyone could have predicted. Had 11 carries, 51 yards, and Gumbawale had the 8 carries for 14. Burkhead, weirdly enough, was just used in the passing game. I don't know. Dameon Pierce is on injured reserve, so he's not playing the rest of the season. Do you want to have the worst running back on the worst team in the NFL? Questionable. But this was a situation we never anticipated. And, for what it's worth, we are disciples of Mario Puig in the show. And Mario has always been a fan of Royce Freeman. I like him as a prospect. He's a talent, kind of in the same vein as Deonta Foreman. The situation is so bleak, though.
Yeah. I'm not super interested because you look at, the carries and the snaps could tell completely different stories. Dario Gumbawale led the team with 42.9% snap share and 8 carries, 0 targets. And then Royce Freeman, 38.1%, 11 carries, 1 target. Then you have Rex Burkhead, who was, pretty much a dud from a fantasy standpoint, didn't get you anything, but he played 12 of the 14 snaps on third down and 0 other snaps. So no goal line carries. That was all Royce Freeman. If you have to take one, you're taking Royce Freeman just because of the carry volume. But even if you guaranteed me double-digit carries again for Royce Freeman, I can't guarantee you that means double-digit fantasy points. So, like I said, it's pretty bleak for him. He's an option. There's obviously a few guys that I like a whole lot more than Freeman this week, but, he does land in the top 5 running back pickups, I guess, right at the back end.
Yeah, at least worth monitoring, especially in deeper leagues like our Dynasty League, for example. You're starting so many different people, and there's so many people rostered that maybe it would make sense. I think for a lot of people, if you somehow dodge the Jonathan Taylor bullet, Zach Moss and Deion Jackson will be the most interesting waiver wire pickups. And frankly, it might be even more interesting because the people who had Jonathan Taylor are out and therefore will not care to make this go-ahead pickup. So
exactly,
Zach Moss got a ton of carries. Deion Jackson had a lot of receptions earlier this season when Jonathan Taylor also missed time. this is a weird spot. What do you see from this backfield overall?
Yeah, I mean, if you watch the Colts all year, your gut would say Deion Jackson was the handcuff to Jonathan Taylor, but obviously they made that move to get Zach Moss, and it seems to clearly be Zach Moss. I mean, they had a 33-point lead to nurse in the second half. They ran the ball a ton. Moss had 24 carries for 81 yards and compared to 13 carries for 55 yards for Jackson. 67.1% of snaps to Moss, only 31.6% of snaps to Jackson. So I think with that in mind, Zach Moss is your number one overall pickup this week. I don't think there's much debate there unless you got a guy that you're thinking about. No. But Zach Moss is my number one overall pickup. I think you can feel pretty comfortable about jumping in and flexing him. And obviously, Jonathan Taylor went on IR this morning, so you got a good rest of season schedule here. I mean, you got the Chargers this week. They're pretty dismal against the run. You're at the Giants, who are 27 against the run. I mean, the Chargers are 30, the Giants are 27. And if you're playing in Week 18, the Texans are dead last. So it is as beautiful of a run, again, that hurts my Jonathan Taylor shares so much. If I just could have survived, I would have been enjoying some very nice games. Even if they're meaningless games, I would have been enjoying some very nice games from him. But I think Zach Moss is your guy to go ahead and dump the rest of the fab on, because you got to win. I mean, it's win or you're done this week. So I
actually think if Zach Moss is one, Deion Jackson's two. Like, I actually think both will get involved, and I do from a pass catching perspective. Deion Jackson will get enough where you can play him if you have to in deeper leagues. Like,
I put Deion Jackson at 4 because there are two guys that I like more.
So let's talk about Tyler Algier, because I'd imagine
he's definitely one of those two.
He is your the bane of your existence right now, because you were so adamant that Tyler Algier was not going to be good early in the season.
It's such a mystery to me. Right. I mean, I always say that fantasy is half opportunity and half skill. And from the snaps that I watched of him early in the year, I didn't see it. But now he has obviously improved, of course, over the course of his rookie season, and the opportunity is suddenly prime because Caleb Huntley, he's out for the season, so he's no longer in the mix. It's an Algier-Patterson split on a team that is definitely going to be run heavy, pretty much no matter what. And Algier is only 37% rostered, so he's plenty available, especially if, 3/4 of your league isn't paying attention at this point because they're out. So he's available. He's coming off 17 carries for 139 yards and a touchdown line. And the Saints defense hasn't exactly been horrific against the run this year. They're middle of the pack, so it's not like we're talking about him doing that against the Texans. And he was on the right end of the backfield split with Cordero Patterson. So snap share was 50% Patterson, 48.6% to Algier. Now, tough matchup this week at Baltimore. You're not going to see that, but then a pretty friendly one against Arizona, who's ranked 23rd in the championship week here. So if you're bolstering your bench, maybe not starting him this week, and considering him as a flex or an insurance option in championship week, I could very much see that. But I put Algier. I think I'm going to rank him number 2 behind Moss and running backs.
I think that's fair. I really have no qualms about any of these 4. I think each one of them has fantasy relevance in this spot, and I understand the importance of the finals or semifinals for a lot of people out there right now. Yeah, I think in deeper leagues, all 4 of these guys, Royce Freeman's the one that I'm like, ooh, a little bit tougher. All 4 of these guys. The other one being Khalil Herbert, who I think is expected to be activated off injury reserve.
I think he's practicing today. He's cleared to practice. He's expected almost certainly back this week. Tough matchup against Buffalo. That's the only thing. We know what's going on with it's been the Montgomery show for so long. You can probably safely move Montgomery to your bench, I would think, if Herbert's cutting in.
No. Montgomery was like the top 3 fantasy scorer this past week.
All right.
No, I don't. I think.
It's a tough matchup against Buffalo, and he's getting Herbert back, so I'd be a lot more hesitant to be starting Montgomery than I would be in previous weeks.
I think it's more like Montgomery gets hurt, but I don't know if you have better abilities or better players to go ahead and play over Montgomery.
Yeah, fair enough. It'll depend on your situation, but it wouldn't be outlandish to consider benching him this week, is what I'm saying. Yeah. And and Herbert, hopefully with some rest, will be nice and explosive here. The other one. So, I said a few guys ahead, Chuba Hubbard's an interesting case too. We talked about him last week, so we're not going to go too deep in here, but he's only 39% rostered. He was out there for 63% of the snaps compared to 30% for Foreman and two whole snaps for Raheem Blackshear. And he didn't get a carry or a target. It's also not a great rest of season schedule for Carolina, but I guess Chuba Hubbard is in that conversation with Royce Freeman, right? The leader of a backfield on a broken team. And, what are you going to do about it? But, I think, if push came to the shove, I'd probably trust Chuba over Royce Freeman this week, but it gets to be close.
Yeah, I would probably lean towards Chuba Hubbard from the receiving perspective, but I would not want to be in that situation. Not enviable for anybody involved. From a deeper running backs, I mean, we had already mentioned Royce Freeman, who I think qualifies, but Patrick Taylor, who we talked about as well, too. If and when A.J. Dillon is unable to play in that matchup Christmas Day against the Dolphins, I like the Hassan Haskins mention that you also have on the down too.
Yeah, I mean, Henry had a good game last week, so you could very well still be alive in your playoffs. Hassan Haskins is your new Henry handcuff because Hilliard went on the IR, I believe, with his neck injury, and Haskins is more like Hilliard in his ability to catch passes, I guess. And obviously it's going to be Henry dominant, but the only other Titans running back to get a carry, just one carry and 2 targets for Haskins. And he had 19.4% of the snaps, whereas Chestnut had just 1 whole snap. So, that was a name that was floated around here and, not super confidently, but there you have it. There, a deep guy that's pretty much 0% rostered that you can think about.
You have a long list of cut names here, and
because there's no reason to be holding on to a lot of these types of players here. I mean, obviously Dameon Pierce on IR, cut him unless it's a keeper league. JT, cut him unless it's a keeper league. Dontrell Hilliard, you can cut. Stop me when you see a name that you shouldn't cut. But obviously Travis Homer and DJ Dallas, cut. Kenneth Walker's back. Rex Burkhead, cut. I mean, he's just no usage there on a terrible team. A spicier one might be Gus Edwards.
I'm not doing that. With
J.K. Dobbins taking over, Gus Edwards did get 7 carries, but only saw 17.5% of the snaps. It was weird that Dobbins didn't play in the fourth quarter. Justice Hill did with them behind, 38.1% for Justice Hill. I don't know. There might be some leagues where you'd consider that. So that's maybe where you stop me there. And then Nyheim Hines, might as well have been a scratch. 3 snaps, no carries. He did have the 10-yard touchdown, I guess. So, there's something there, but he can go ahead and go back onto the wire. And then we get to the controversial ones. I mentioned benching guys. Obviously, you bench Kareem Hunt. You can't really start him in the playoffs. You bench, maybe not benching David Montgomery. We can argue about that one. You bench Cordero Patterson, probably. He's RB2 on a terrible team. You bench Deontay Foreman.
I'm cutting Foreman. So I'm actually accelerating. I'm pushing. I have this decision to make. I would cut Foreman in favor of any of the 4 guys, Zach Moss, Deion Jackson, Algier, and Khalil Herbert. I'm cutting Foreman, and I would play all 4 of those over Foreman, certainly over the other guys you mentioned too. But I'm at that point with him.
So I think we established our line then.
Yes, I agree.
What did we call it a couple of years ago? Was it the Cole Beasley line or something? I don't know. It was like your waiver wire line of receivers or something. Yeah, I don't know. Somebody, maybe another show did that. I just remember there being a line. So we'll call it the Deontay Foreman line this year.
For sure. Just because it fits into what you're discussing. Somebody asked, full point PPR this week, do you play Travis Etienne or David Montgomery? I think you are clearly leaning Travis Etienne in that case, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd look at the matchups, but Etienne, I think, is off the top of my head is who I'd go with.
Jaguars have the Jets on Thursday night, and I guess with your concerns with Montgomery splitting time with Khalil Herbert, who's expected to be activated off of injury reserve.
Ooh, that is such a difficult decision.
I actually disagree. No, I'm fully going Travis Etienne. No questions whatsoever. Etienne's getting the workload. The Jaguars are really hot right now.
Actually, you're right. He's coming off a 100-yard game.
Yeah, no. The important part for me is if Quinnen Williams, the stud defense tackle for the Jets, is out a consecutive week. He didn't play. He was close to playing this past against the Lions. Was not. If Quinnen Williams is in, it makes things more difficult. It's still Etienne.
And I expect Khalil Herbert to get a whole lot more work than JaMychal Hasty. So, that's the nail right there.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer for me. All right, let's move over to the wide receivers. We had talked about Donovan Peoples-Jones, Mr. Touchdown scorer himself on that Saturday night game. Chris Moore, who despite both Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins being out, did not repeat his 10-catch, 112-yard day, whatever it was from the week before. Romeo Doubs, we mentioned, Elijah Moore, and not so much. Nelson Aguilar, rest of some other guys, not too interesting.
Obviously, Aguilar did not work out, given Jacoby Myers was back.
Well, I was just going to say, all of the Patriots' offense really didn't work out like that. It was Ramondre Stevenson overall, which has been what you'd anticipate when Matt Patricia and Joe Judge are your offense coordinators. Treylon Burks at 49% just sneaks in under our threshold. I know you're excited to talk about your boy from a dynasty perspective, so let's go with Treylon Burks here.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much to say that hasn't already been said about him. I like him. He passes the eye test. He's the best, most skilled wide receiver on that team. I'll say he's better than Robert Woods and Westbrook-Ikhine without really batting an eye there. And the only downside is all the Chigi Okonkwo shares, might see a little less volume with, another viable pass catcher to throw to. And, of course, there's another flag with Malik Willis at quarterback. We don't know. I believe Burks was hurt the last time Willis played. I'm not 100% on that. But it's also a pretty tough upcoming schedule. Houston, Dallas. Well, Houston this week is tough apparently against wide receivers, but then Dallas and Jacksonville are not. So a good fantasy championship. So again, if you're making your bench the best it could be, I think you go ahead and pick up Burks, see what he does this week, and suddenly he could get in the flex conversation in week 17.
So along the same lines, there's a rookie receiver who I think also is a guy that you need to pick up, if only to block people. And I'm in a dynasty league where I have a absolutely dominant team and absolutely stacked bench, and I'm still making space for that player. It's Jahan Dotson, who continues to be a touchdown machine when he's been healthy for the Commanders. I thought of the rookie receivers this year, Dotson was lower on my list by a pretty dramatic margin. And while he's been inconsistent and hasn't been involved all that often, Taylor Heineke and McLaurin and Commanders offense runs through Brian Robinson for whatever the reason, Jahan Dotson just continues to score touchdowns. 106 yards, had that 19-yard touchdown, another 60-yard bomb early, which really kind of flipped the script of that Giants Commanders.
He's a playmaker.
Game. Yeah.
That's what I wrote down. I'm like, he's a playmaker.
Yeah.
He had the touchdown, like I said, the 61-yard catch. He had as many targets as Terry McLaurin, so that's not something to just overlook. So definitely want to, note that. Pretty decent upcoming schedule: San Francisco, Cleveland, Dallas. All I guess middle to bottom half against wide receivers. Jahan Dotson is definitely in your among the top wide receiver pickups this week for sure.
It's weird because we do this for tight ends all the time. We're just hoping they score a touchdown. The Juwan Johnson game, 2 touchdowns, I think that's kind of what you're hoping for Jahan Dotson. You don't want to start him because you're hoping for a touchdown, but if you take that away from somebody else, that's a roll of the dice that is gone. I think Jahan Dotson has as much opportunity to outscore Chris Moore, for example, who's been benefiting from Nico Collins and Brandon Cooks being out. And, he's still looking fine. You got the Titans this week. Great matchup, same with the Jaguars as well. It's just what happens if Nico Collins and Brandon Cooks do return.
Someone actually dropped Brandon Cooks in our stake league, and I picked him up for $3 in fab, I think it cost me, because I figured why the heck not, just in case he ends up being something. So, I guess that's the other side of that. But yeah, Chris Moore, 19%, still absolutely on the radar. And then the other guy that I definitely wanted to highlight was Elijah Moore, 36%. He's seen his role grow. Obviously, you don't love Zach Wilson at the helm, but it was okay with Zach Wilson at the helm. I mean, so the last 2 weeks, Elijah Moore, 82.2% and 73.8% of snaps, second to only Garrett Wilson. Of course, Corey Davis being banged up has had something to do with it. And last week, Moore finished with 4 catches on 7 targets for 51 yards. In a way, I almost compare him to being this year's Brandon Ayuk, right? Where Brandon Ayuk, you drafted him 4th or 5th round with pretty high expectations last year. He was in the doghouse early. He wasn't getting used. And then he kind of came on a little bit towards the end of the season. And now look at him this year. I think we could see a similar trajectory with Elijah Moore. It could be, a redemption for a lot of people. Unfortunately, like Brandon Ayuk, you got to have a short memory in fantasy sometimes. Got to be like a goldfish, like Ted Lasso says. Because, if you don't, my brother, it was the same way. Never again am I touching Brandon Ayuk. He was so mad. And a lot of people are going to have that same taste with Elijah Moore. I mean, I cut Elijah Moore 6 weeks ago in a 14-team league. Because it was that bad, and it sucks to depart with your 5th round pick like that, but I think we're going to see a late season fantasy redemption from him. Got a great shot against the Jags this week, who are 25th against opposing wide receivers. Ends a little tougher with the Seahawks and the Dolphins here, but don't discount Elijah Moore. There's a lot of availability out there too.
Let's talk Rashid Shaheed real quick too, the dynamic playmaker for the Saints, who I thought was just kind of a returner, but 4 consecutive weeks of 40-yard receptions or more. This one obviously came from Taysom Hill. I was in a very inconsequential bet with a friend that Andy Dalton was going to outscore Zach Wilson in fantasy points, and I was celebrating when I saw that Rashid Shaheed had scored a touchdown. Taysom Hill threw it instead, so I ended up losing that bet from that purpose. So, okay, whatever else.
Yes.
I want to tie it in because you had mentioned Jarvis Landry, or you had written down, I should say, Jarvis Landry in the cut list. I think if you're the Saints, who are I guess they're not out of playoff contention, I should be clear. They should be. They're
Somebody's
got to
win that division, right?
Yeah, it's the Buccaneers, and then they lose right away because everyone sucks in that division.
Yeah, that Buccaneers under bet's looking pretty nice.
Oh yeah, I think you're walking away actually with the over-unders from this year after we both did pretty well last year. I think Rashid Shaheed is actually one of those players you want to have in your lineup with the Saints, and he continues to make plays when he's out there. At some point, we have to recognize him as a guy that in really deep 14-team leagues probably is a start.
Yeah, glass half full with my my broken and beaten down dynasty team, but I got Rashid Shaheed off the waiver wire for nothing 2 weeks ago, and he's definitely going to be in one of my 10, 15 keepers that we carry over there. So he's definitely going to be, and just because of the big playability. Now, this is as much of a conversation as it is about Shaheed's big playability, about we probably are cutting Jarvis Landry right now. I'm benching Chris Olave. I can't stand it anymore. With Dalton at the helm, he has just not been it. Jameis would force feed him the ball. When Jameis was quarterback, it was great for Olave. Dalton, not so much. He spreads it around a little bit more. And obviously they get Taysom Hill mixed in there, but I'm benching Olave for J.K. Dobbins, for Deontay Johnson, for those types of decisions.
Those guys are pretty clearly.
I mean, that wasn't the case a week ago when we had this conversation though. So, okay. But in any case, so this is a Rashid Shaheed conversation, I guess. He's only 1% rostered, so he's out there. He's your kind of your prototypical best ball type because, he could easily get shut down. He's had some duds this year, so you have to be prepared for that. I also put a note in here. Olave hasn't seen double-digit targets since week 7. But anyway, I'm not saying pick up Shaheed and start him over Olave or anything like that. Shaheed is if you need a real bad dice throw and someone that could bust off an 80-yard touchdown, certainly has the skill to do so. Maybe Dalton doesn't have the arm, but Taysom does. Somebody does. He's a guy on there. He makes the list.
I just think playmakers is what the Saints offense needs, among other things. And Taysom Hill's not that. But Rashid Shaheed might be an interesting name as they kind of continue maneuvering through the NFC South division. You'd also mentioned Alec Pierce in your cut list. Sammy Watkins was on the Packers cut list, so certainly should be for fantasy managers out there too. I don't know. I had actually in AutoNew, which used to be a partner sponsor for us. I love that format, by the way. I had cut Deontay Johnson actually when the last week of Kenny Pickett happened, and then obviously gets injured. Kenny Pickett is supposed to return. I'm not sure if you saw that was like a breaking news thing earlier in the show, and I was like, I'm not even sure this matters. Kenny Pickett is supposed to return from his concussion and start over Trubisky, but maybe that hurts Deontay Johnson. I'm not cutting Deontay Johnson at this point. He's been
absolutely not.
Pretty clear. That was more of a salary ramification thing. And go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say another name that Kevin Payne brought up in his weekly waiver wire column, which 20 minutes ago came out on the website. He brought up Noah Brown, who scored twice, and he's only 2% rostered. So, put yourself in the difficult scenario of picking between Noah Brown and Rashid Shaheed. Are there those guys? I mean, which one do you rank higher?
I think Noah Brown because he plays a little bit more, but there is the upside potential for Rashid Shaheed. This actually brings up another point. Anybody who picked up T.Y. Hilton, don't play fantasy football next year. It's pointless because you don't get it. Like T.Y. Hilton was never, ever, ever going to be a factor. The fact that the Cowboys picked him up is as stupid as it gets. You shouldn't be making the same mistake as Jerry Jones.
Right? I will extend that. I will extend that to the same people who have been holding on to Odell Beckham all year.
Yes.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, then if your last straw should have been the Cowboys worked him out and didn't sign him.
Right, and he had that weird thing as well too at the airport. I had multiple questions last week, and I do a lot of different hits across the world, across the states, right? And I hear a lot of different things. So I shouldn't be surprised, but when multiple people are asking if T.Y. Hilton should be in your fantasy lineup, I'm just going to help you out. Like, let's just not do fantasy football because this is not a spot for you to be making that conversation. Don't roster T.Y. Hilton at all, ever, but certainly don't be considering starting him at this point.
I will admit that, I'm not pure in this situation. I've held on and picked up Josh Gordon more times after his prime than I should have ever done because it's because I rostered him during that phenomenal run. But it's all in the same. It's happy memories. So it's all in the same vein. So I what is it? He who casts in can't throw stones or something like that. So I can't rip too much, but it's all in the same vein here. You got to eventually quit these washed up type of guys.
If that quote isn't already attributed to somebody, we can officially tag that to Jake Letarski. That's a good one there.
Probably Jesus Christ. No.
All right, let's move on.
Somewhere in that book.
In that big Bible somewhere out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the tight ends. Before we do so, word from our sponsors, Monkey Knife Fight. Football is almost done on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for, obviously, and if college football is more of a speed. They got plenty of bowl games as well on the table. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. Thank goodness. It's just easy to play, easy to win. Daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. What are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. All right, so we had talked about the tight end, the Titans tight end, Chig. I'm just going to keep saying that way. I have to always preface because names could get concerning. And then we had also mentioned Hayden Hurst is a really interesting pickup if T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd didn't play.
That was one of those where we needed every domino to fall, right?
And Hurst did not play. So it really didn't work out in our favor.
So that's the tight end landscape this year.
It really
that's
has
everything.
I had just retweeted this. Field Yates. Somebody had asked, what have you put at least 10,000 hours of your life into? And Field Yates had said, trying to find a tight end not named Travis Kelce that I can actually start in fantasy football every week. Yes, I feel the exact same way. So here we go. Taysom Hill, once again, back on that board. If you roll the dice on Taysom Hill or Jawan Johnson, thank you, Saints tight ends, you got a good opportunity to win your fantasy matchup that week.
I mean, that's what it feels like at tight end this year, right? You're spinning a wheel, and it's like 10 squares are red and one is black, and you got to get the winner or something like that. The guy that's going to find the end zone, and that's honestly what it feels like, because you could say both with Taysom Hill and Jawan Johnson. He'll have a big week where of course Taysom Hill tight end eligible. That's funny. He didn't get a single target, I don't think, but he threw that long passing touchdown, right? So that gets you 8 fantasy points, and that is plenty for your tight end if it's not Travis Kelce. So there's that, and then of course you got Jawan Johnson, who's just incredibly touchdown dependent, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could be a Tunyon type year for him if he keeps scoring at this type of pace. And so you're looking at guys like that. Obviously, we have to go back to Chigi Okonkwo. He's still 29% rostered. There's good and bad with Chigi, because the nice thing is he played a season high 57.9% of snaps. He played more snaps than Austin Hooper, so that's significant. Then on the downside, Treylon Burks is back, and he should command 6 to 8 targets. I think he deserves that.
And Malik Willis possibly starting.
But then again, Malik Willis is your starting quarterback. So I'm really falling off on Chigi a little bit. You can look at Robert Tonyan, Tyler Conklin, Noah Fant. The other thing in Dynasty that I lost on, I think I've made the wrong decision on Hunter Henry and Noah Fant for 6 consecutive weeks now. Whichever one I bench is getting a touchdown and 15 points. Whichever one I started is getting less than 5. And again, I started Henry, benched Fant this week. It is just because what happens is I get a sour taste in my mouth from the other guy. I flip it, and then, of course, he goes ahead. If I'd have just made the same thing, I'd be in a much better spot. But anyway, they're all in this situation here. And also, just in case people were sleeping in your league, Darren Waller is 79%. So there's a fifth of Yahoo leagues. He's out there. So it's worth a look, because there are a lot of people that are tuned out now that we're down to 4 teams. I'm sure plenty of people picked him up last week. Last week was probably the chance, but obviously if he's out there, even if you have Kelce, dump all your fab on him. Screw the other guy trying to do a tight end.
Absolutely. In the Vegas Superflex League, which is a tight end premium league, Darren Waller was somehow available. I mean, we have IR spots. I have no idea how that happened. That ended up being a big difference maker for one of Jeff Pete. Listen, I'm not positive. I got screwed out of the 6th place spot. I'm saying I got mercy killed, so I don't have to worry about Lamar Jackson, who was my number 5 overall pick there. And much like our Dynasty League, Harry also mercy killed me in the round 1 of the playoffs too without Lamar Jackson. Yes. So that was good. Jake, we actually have a lot of lineup questions. So you want to just run through the defenses real quick while I get those queued up?
Yeah, I listed a whole bunch of them, but Titans are the number 1 option, right? 48% roster. They're home against Houston. They're Jerry's number 1 option, and his. I think you have to go to them first, right? And then it starts to get really, really dicey. I mean, you could take the Jags against Zach Wilson. They're only 7%. They're the most readily available. Jerry's number 2, not to give away the ship, was the Browns home against New Orleans. Sure, interesting. It's a road matchup, but the Bengals at Tampa Bay, this is a matchup of the Bengals defense looking pretty good lately and the Bucs offense looking pretty horrible lately. So, you think about that a little bit, but, you could always, if you want to fade Brock Purdy, I guess you could look at the Commanders, but they're on the road. I don't like that either. So I'm looking at the Titans. I'm looking at the Bengals. I'm looking at the Jags, and I might look at the Browns. But there are a lot of these that I just don't love.
See, the Steelers versus Raiders. I actually don't mind the Raiders versus Steelers as well, too, now that we know that Kenny Pickett is likely going to be the starter. And if you said third-string quarterback for the Broncos, let's say Russell Wilson wasn't out there. I know Brett Ripien had his injury was too. Maybe the Rams, but I don't know if they have.
It was just a concussion for us, right?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Man,
I'm pretty sure.
I thought it was like
I thought it was like his first career.
Could be. Either way.
And plus, he's got that concussion water, right? That cures concussions.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's a concussion.
Okay, so he should be.
Anyway, he'll drink his magic water. He'll be back this week.
He should be fine. All right, so Jake got a couple of questions, both roster-wise and waiver-wire. So this person, I confirmed, is in a 10-team league. They want you to rank these priority waiver-wire guys. So Darren Waller, Dallas Goedert, Marquise Brown, Michael Pittman, Deontay Johnson.
Waller, Pittman,
Deontay Johnson.
Goddard, Deontay, Hollywood.
Okay. And they'd be cutting one of their defenses. They have 2 defenses. I was shocked. I think Zay Jones is in this too, as well with his 3 touchdowns. I'm not like when you have names like this. It
might depend on team names. If you have Kelsey, I would still call Pittman the number 1 pickup. But if you have anybody else, then Waller's number 1.
And he was saying stash Waller or Goddard. I would assume you're using that language with the assumption that you're blocking your opponent. That still might be more valuable as opposed to.
Did I miss defense. Goddard? Is he coming off IR this week?
Yes, he got actually activated today. I think.
He got activated today, so I totally missed that. Mm-hmm. So I made that note about Darren Waller being 79% rostered. Dallas Goedert is way more rostered. He's 89% rostered. So good luck. That's not happening. But Waller might have a little availability out there.
Yeah, with with Kenny Pickett back, Deontay Johnson falls a little bit lower. Like I would consider Michael Pittman and then Waller, like one of the 2. And that definitely hard.
I'm still going to start Deontay over Olave this week.
That's fine. I don't argue that with what Olave's done over the past 3 weeks. Yeah,
unless they suddenly decide Jameis is starting, then Olave is like top 25.
One of your favorite ones. Defense question here. So did they Rams, Bengals, Chargers, or Cardinals? We don't have Jeff's weekly rankings which is always my helpful
Rams,
favorite thing.
Bengals, Chargers, or Cardinals.
So the Chargers are the only one I'm blanking on who they play.
They're Colts on Monday night.
Oh man,
Cardinals
isn't it the Chargers?
Are home against the Bucs. Did I?
I
might have wrote down last week's matchups for some of these defenses. Whoops.
Well, the most important thing is the Titans do play the Texans, so that is clearly.
Yeah, that's the one. But yeah, for some reason I had the Bengals at Tampa Bay. That's not right. I apologize for that. Tampa Bay is at the Cardinals. And I am not actually interested in the Cardinals at all. So
I go Chargers if they're going against the Colts. And worth pointing out, Derwin James could be making his return as well. I think he missed last week or last 2 weeks. So I like the Chargers in that matchup.
Roll with the Chargers. And if you're ahead by a couple points, then you can always just scratch them from your lineup, right? Because it's Monday night. It's the last game.
Yeah, good point. Okay, next one. Pick 2 of these 4. Start 2 or start. So I guess you could pick 3 technically. So Eckler, Kamara, Stevenson, or McKinnon. You have to at least have 2. You could have up to 3.
This is going to sound weird, but I think Kamara sits.
I think that might be the case as well too. McKinnon's been pretty involved. Now that was kind of a slam dunk matchup.
McKinnon is a league winner. He is like the number 1 RB in back-to-back weeks. I don't think you can bench McKinnon.
Yeah, especially in a PPR league, which is what this was. I would take McKinnon over Kamara.
Kamara just
against the Seahawks. That there should be offense involved. Yes, I think
Kamara in standard. Okay, I know PPR is a lot of his appeal, but in standard formats, Week 15 was his first double-digit standard point since Week 8. He's in single digits all of those weeks. So it's a good matchup against the Browns on paper here, but I don't think you can bench Jerick McKinnon.
All right, so this is actually kind of a hard one. Do you flex Deion Jackson or Mike Evans? Half-point PPR.
Half-point PPR? I'm going to go Mike Evans there. I know it's been brutal, but I think you have to.
I think you go with Mike Evans, too. I just don't see Deion Jackson in a half-point PPR setting doing as well.
The thing is with Mike Evans, the opportunity. Last week, 10 targets, 9 targets, 4, and then 9. So in 3 of the last 4 weeks, he's had 9 or more targets. That's I would be very surprised if Deion Jackson had 9 carries. So
yeah.
Put it that way. That's how I'm making that decision.
Even with the Chargers' run defense being what it is, I tend to agree with you as well. Along the same lines, Jay Red, who's been with us all season long, hopefully he's in a spot here with the championship game that we can help him out. He's putting in a bid for Zach Moss. If he gets Zach Moss, which of these 2 does he start in a full point PPR setting? So Miles Sanders, I would imagine, is 1.
Definitely starting Miles Sanders.
Then there's Chuba Hubbard, Fournette, Algier, and Zach Moss for that other spot.
Moss over It's Moss and then Algier. I don't love Fournette.
Yeah, and he's been doing okay, like the 8 to 10 point range in PPR. I know Rashad White's still being a factor, but I've been having to play Fournette and being like, oh, good, he got 10 points. Happy about that.
Yeah. I'm going to peek at the snap share quick in Tampa Bay and see what it was last week.
Okay.
It was Fournette 56.5, 42% for Rashad White. I don't know. I don't love it. I mean, I guess I could see, the Cardinals playing really bad with McSorley as their quarterback, and then Tampa Bay being in a position to run out the clock at the end, which would lean more towards Fournette. God, that's what I might change my mind on a bunch of times. Sanders is your lock.
The same thing. So Sanders for sure. I actually don't mind Algier, to be honest. I mean, he's been productive. I know he's been splitting time with Patterson, but he's been productive when he's getting the carries. That is interesting to me in that instance. Jay, you might have to.
They're all splits. So
I was going to say, Jay, you might have to message Jake or I on Twitter as we get closer to like Saturday or Sunday, because I could waffle on that 3 or 4 times as we're doing the show at the moment. Let's see. We have just 2 more, or I guess 3 more. So Waller or Ingram, Evan Ingram in half-point PPR. Obviously, again, Evan Ingram Thursday against the Jets. Darren Waller, man, I'm blanking right now as to who the Raiders are playing, but
the Steelers, right?
Yes, you're right.
Did I get that matchup right? Did I write that down?
Yes,
right?
because we were talking about the
Raiders are at the Steelers.
Yep.
Ooh, that's tough. I think I got to go Waller.
I think I am as well too. Even though Evan Ingram for now back-to-back weeks has been, I think, a top 6 fantasy tight end. Obviously, he had the major week 2 weeks ago.
I see. I have in Stake League every week. I have a Hawkinson Ingram situation because I just picked Ingram up a while back, and it's Hawkinson every time. But that's been the wrong decision, I think, for 3 weeks in a row now.
Okay, well, you are still doing better than like 90% of people at tight end. So this is a beggars don't need to be choosers kind of deal.
Exactly.
All right, so 2 more questions here. Defensively, do you go with the Chiefs? Or do you play the Jaguars against Zach Wilson, Browns in their matchup with the Bengals against the Buccaneers? No, not against the Bengals against whatever they're playing against.
I think I'd play the Jags over the Chiefs or Bengals over. Oh, Bengals are at New England. I don't want to touch that. Okay. Sorry for recommending the Bengals. Erase that. That was I wrote down the wrong matchup. You can't bet 1,000 all year, I guess. Honestly, so it's the Chiefs at home, which I like.
Against the Seahawks.
The over-under on that game's 48.5. Yeah. Now, a lot of that's because of the Chiefs. Over-under on the Jets game's 38. Give me the Jags. Count on Zach Wilson to make a mistake. It's like Jay Cutler. Jay's going to give us the ball. Zach's going to give us the ball.
The over-under on Browns Saints is 31, though. I mean, like that.
Oh, was Browns part of that?
Yeah.
And Browns are the home team?
31. That's the lowest over-under I've seen at all. I mean, that's insane.
Geez, that is really?
Yes. Over-under 31 points for Browns Saints. I think it's Browns. I think that Browns are the play.
Yeah, just because. Okay, so again, when you have these toss-ups, I always fall back on home team, lowest total, right? So I guess I got to stick to that mantra here and go with the Browns. You're right.
Last question, perfect one to end what is going to be a pivotal week for a lot of people. Replacing Jalen Hurts more than likely this week. Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy, Minshew, or Derek Carr?
It's Trevor Lawrence, right? He's on fire.
So I understand it. I get it.
Trevor Lawrence is going to be ranked in the top 10 next year. And I was kind of laying out the quarterbacks if everyone's healthy, and you could make a case for him at like 5 or 6, that high.
And if the rushing kind of gets to be a little bit more involved, because we know Trevor Lawrence can do that. Maybe if they expand the offense thing a little bit further. I agree with you. Trevor Lawrence has been dynamic. Yeah. This is the toughest matchup in this stretch. But Trevor Lawrence is you have to play.
I mean, you look at Allen Hurts, Mahomes, then you get Herbert. Maybe Burrow, Herbert, sure. and then there's Fields. Fields will be up there. Fields and then Lawrence. So yeah, QB7 next year. Yeah, I don't even think that's absolutely. Yeah, I don't even think that's too much of a stretch. I mean, that is an instant. That was the easiest question we had. So thank you so much. Let's go, Trevor Lawrence. Even with the Jets situation, I'm going to ride the hot hand.
I agree with you. All right,
unless it's suddenly a snowstorm or something over there, right. Which is possible.
Certainly can change as we kind of get into.
It's looking at 34 and partly cloudy according to AccuWeather. So
I know the East Coast is getting hit by the cold stuff right now.
We're about to be -1 here in Christmas time. I thought that was hilarious on the Monday night game. They're like 14 degrees. It's so cold out. I mean, hey, stick around a couple days here and see what -1 feels like.
I don't know if you listened to the weather report, but we are going to have a blizzard with a foot of snow and 30-mile-per-hour winds on Thursday and Friday. So
the travel home for the holidays is
one of those that you're
going to be glorious.
Yeah, you're driving 10 miles an hour on the highway. All right, that does it for us on the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you by No House Advantage. Guys, best of luck. Obviously, we've had listeners the entire season long. A lot of you have really familiar names. I know Jake and I want to give you the best advice as possible, but right now, just hoping you guys get there. Let's get to the championship. Let's get the win.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for every.
I'm so happy and honored that we had all these questions. That means that people are sticking around. That means that hopefully people have used our advice and been able to help improve their rosters and are still alive. And hopefully we can see you all back next week.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like you said, so best of luck to everyone out there, and hopefully we see a lot of happy faces and the happy championships either this week or next week. So thanks everyone for listening.